Good afternoon, everyone. This is Sergei Lagudinsky. I'm a member of the European Parliament greeting you from Brussels. Today we're here to talk about a topic which is very current, not just because we are in the middle of various Pride months and Pride celebrations in many different cities and countries worldwide, but also because there are some developments here in Brussels within the Commission that have to do something with our topic, but we are also in the middle of a war by a regime who started their oppressive policies towards domestic audiences with a law that penalized and suppressed LGBTI community. This was the first step in a long path towards oppression and towards war and genocide as we see now. But we start today talking about the issue of rule of law, democracy, and the state of rights, liberty rights for people of various minorities, especially LGBTI minorities today, with two experts and dear colleagues, dear friends who are joining us from Hungary, from Budapest. Márta Pardavi is a co-chair of Hungarian Helsinki Committee. She serves also on the board of PIL-NET, International Partnership for Human Rights, and many other organizations. She is a face of rule of law and democracy debate in Hungary and Europe-wide, here in Brussels. A very well-known expert, and I'm very, very happy and very privileged that Luca Dudits is joining us as well. I don't know, Luca, whether you're joining us from Budapest or from any other town. I guess so, yes. So welcome to Brussels from Budapest. She is executive board member and communications expert and officer for Háttér Society. You correct me if I'm wrong in my pronunciation, and maybe you could also explain what this society does. You studied in UCL, you are an expert on Eastern European minorities and their social and economic status, and you joined Háttér in 2020 and has been mostly involved in awareness raising, campaigns, advocacy, and trainings. Welcome, both of you. My question first goes to Márta. Márta, yesterday the Commission has presented the rule of law report, and as very often, Hungary is of course featured prominently there. What is the general state of rule of law and democracy from your perspective? Maybe you could start with this brief introduction, and from there, let's go to the specific topic of the day.
Yes, hello everybody. Thank you very much, Sergei, for convening this important discussion today about human rights and specifically the rights of LGBTQI people in Hungary. It is indeed a day after the Commission released its third annual rule of law report. This is supposed to be more of a descriptive and preventive tool than one that is meant to really address the concerns that Hungary and some other member states such as Poland pose to the core values of the European Union. And when it comes to Hungary, of course, the chapter is extremely long. It mostly, I think, resonates with the concerns of NGOs that are focused on the rule of law and the deficiencies or the breakdown of it in Hungary. In fact, 9 NGOs had put together a report that was an input to the Commission's own work. And we saw many of our concerns reflected. Still, this is more of a description of the state of affairs. And I think one recurring phrase can be taken out and used as an emblematic phrase for the whole chapter, and this would be concerns remain unaddressed. It's the third time that the Commission has put together the annual rule of law report, but there is many other bodies of evidence, documents from European Union institutions and others, such as the Council of Europe, or the Venice Commission, or even the UN human rights system, which give a very long account of the democratic backsliding, the rule of law dismantling that's been going on in Hungary. And these concerns from these bodies remain unaddressed. And it's not only the views or the opinions or the conclusions of various human rights monitoring bodies, but in fact, court rulings also remain unaddressed. And I think this is the most important part, that the Commission this year innovated in the report. It made recommendations, basically saying that each member state has to or should enact some changes. And in the case of Hungary, these recommendations are quite profound, but still, being a rule of law report, this cannot address the wide range of human rights issues that are on the table in Hungary and that have been causing not only a headache for European institutions or the Council of Europe, but really head and heartache for Hungarian citizens. And these human rights concerns cannot be covered under the current framework of the rule of law report. And therefore, if somebody just reads the rule of law report from the Commission, they will get a very concerning picture of the state of affairs, about the judiciary, about the media, about anti-corruption, or in general, the checks and balances. But they will not understand the depth of uncertainty and anxiety that policies and laws adopted by the Hungarian government and the parliament over the past 10 years are causing to many Hungarians.
Yeah, precisely that. Márta, indeed, when we read these reports, these are words, these are reports, it's a very dry kind of juristic legal language. But we do not see the real cases, and the real cases are actually amazing in the most negative sense. I mean, just in February, a court of appeal in Hungary said that it is okay to call a lesbian organization in Hungary a ring of pedophiles. Luca, you can correct me if I'm quoting it wrong, but they said this is okay. This is within the premises of what is allowed, and it also reprehended RTL Club, which is one of the last remaining independent TV stations. It was reprehended for gay propaganda, for just running a public ad. An advertisement by Háttér, but as far as I understand, this is your organization, Luca. How do you feel when you read something like that and being part of the NGOs that are basically put in the spotlight with the most devastating and the most dehumanizing characteristics? How do you live in this country?
I think dehumanization and demonization are pretty much part of working for an NGO and also being part of the LGBTQI community now in Hungary. It has been going on for more than 2 years now that the government has been spreading misinformation, stereotypical language, harmful narratives about LGBTQI people. And, this means that they are influencing the public opinion, which then in turn results in more homophobia, transphobia, more discrimination, more hate crimes, violent hate crimes, unfortunately. But also, I think they also wanted to influence the public discourse in a way that that is much more unbalanced. That they are kind of importing narratives from the U.S. or from the U.K. from instances that never happened here. For example, just this spring we had a referendum about LGBTQI issues, which was connected to the propaganda law that was passed last summer. And there was a very swift reaction from the EU that launched an infringement procedure against Hungary because of the discriminatory nature of the law. And then Orbán Viktor himself announced that they will be holding a referendum to showcase the support from the Hungarian public of the anti-LGBTQI laws. And this law basically put an equality mark between being LGBTQI or speaking about LGBTQI topics and between harming children, which is incredibly harmful for not just the communities, but it also has a huge chilling effect on society. I know Marta has already talked about this. And this referendum consisted of originally 5, but then only 4 questions asking people whether they would, for example, allow topics or school workshops about just sexual orientations for children. And the Hungarian state media was showcasing videos taken in Canada, as far as I know, that had, I think, drag queens reading out loud stories in kindergartens. No, I don't think there is any problem with that, but this is a video footage from Canada and clearly not from Hungary. And to try to prove that this is something that is currently happening, as if LGBTQI activists are actively going to kindergartens and schools and trying to influence them in any way, is just very harmful. And it again plays into the stereotype of LGBTQI people being just harmful for kids. So yeah, it has been, I think, incredibly difficult in the last few years.
But just to recapitalize and to look at what is it about, also what it is about for the Commission. There are 2 instances, especially, that the Commission focusing in the procedure against Hungary. Number 1 is the law that was enacted by the Hungarian Parliament. Maybe Marta, you could explain what kind of a law it is and what are the problems with that. And then the second instance, maybe Luca could add, because there are 2 occasions on why the Commission is going against Hungary. Marta, what about the law?
Sure, Sergey. In your opening remarks, you spoke about Russia, right? And basically, one could say the authoritarian playbook or the liberal playbook, and how stigmatization is a part of that, and how in Russia the first real game changer law targeted and criminalized, as it was called, homosexual propaganda. Now, of course, in Russia, then civil society organizations were and are targeted, and now increasingly everybody who comes into contact with organizations that are labeled as foreign agents are at risk, and they're stigmatized and criminalized. Sadly, the same pattern is happening in Hungary, albeit, of course, with a different, lesser intensity. I wouldn't want to say that the level of oppression in Hungary is the same as in Russia, but the tools, the patterns are strikingly and scarily similar. And so we also in Hungary had our own foreign funded NGO law in 2017, and last summer in 2021, there was just basically a year ago an amendment adopted by the parliament to, so to say, as it was frame to take more severe action against pedophile offenders and to amend certain laws for protecting children. And under the guise of protecting children and taking legal action against criminals, a last-minute amendment was added to this law that basically outlaws any depiction or discussion of diverse gender identities and sexual orientation in the public sphere. So it basically stigmatizes portraying and discussing, as it is often said, non-traditional gender roles, non-traditional family roles or sexual orientation, and tries to keep this out of the sphere where children might be exposed to this, so media and schools and bookstores and newspapers and the like. And it really prohibits and limits access to content that is set to propagate or portray divergence from self-identity corresponding to sex at birth, sex change, or homosexuality. Now, if people will find this very familiar, because this is not a Hungarian, as we say, unicum, a unique specialty, but this is really across the board, happening in many parts of the world, and it's being actually, I think, so to say, imported to Hungary with a large amount of funding, and also with the open, outstretched arms of the Hungarian government and their ideologues. And so this basically outlawed the public portrayal and the discussion of something that in the European Union is, I think, really moving towards very widespread public acceptance.
Yeah.
I really remember how the president of the Commission herself said, right, that a family in one EU member state should be a family in every EU member state. Now, this is certainly not what's happening in Hungary, and under the protecting of children excuse, this stigmatization, this labeling, this basically discriminatory campaign started against LGBTQI people. This sadly came at a time where most things when it comes to human rights are going downhill in Hungary. But I think in general, and Luca, you'll know better than me, but in general, I think there was a sort of a very fragile, hopeful progress in Hungary too, in terms of public perceptions and attitudes.
Márta, but just to stay a second, a little bit longer on this issue of the law. And by the way, my appeal to everyone who is watching us on Facebook or on YouTube, you can put your questions in the commentary section in the comments, and we will be able to post them to our guests. But just very briefly, coming back to this law, I mean, has this law been implemented? What are the factual consequences of this law? What happens if, say, someone comes to school or a teacher at school invites a transgender person to speak to children, to students? Has it ever happened? And what happens to them? Or is it being tolerated? Is it just maybe some ideological campaigning? I don't know who Márta or Luca, whoever can answer the question.
I think Luca has a lot of examples of how this actually has had an effect, a very chilling effect. And this is, in most cases, as we've seen it in Hungary, when it comes to these I'd say, Russia-inspired laws and policies, the main aim with them is to have a chilling effect. So many times they will remain unenforced. They will remain on the books, like the criminalization of, for example, legal assistance or other types of assistance to migrants. No one has been prosecuted, but people do get the message. And this chilling effect really has of course, an unacceptable effect in the population and very specific outcomes. And the chilling effect is something that has been pointed out also by the various organizations that have looked at this law and have condemned it. So, I have to say this, that right after the law was adopted in the European Council, where the heads of state and governments meet, there was, at least according to media reports, 2 hours of really superheated, very, very direct criticism leveled at the Hungarian Prime Minister. The European Parliament also passed a resolution. Then later on, the Venice Commission of the Council of Europe, the independent constitutional lawyers advising on these issues, said that these restrictions can deny legitimate expressions of sexual orientation and gender identity, and these are protected otherwise by the European Convention on Human Rights. So basically all the political, legal assessors have said that this is absolutely unacceptable in the EU. And it's still it's not only in the books, but it has a very clear, tangible, practical effect.
Lutz, with that, maybe to you, and also, by the way, there is a question of one of the viewers who is asking, and I would like to alert our viewers that when you post your question, then your name, the name of the profile will be visible here, just so that you know that you are exposing your Facebook identity or YouTube identity. But one of the questions is here: what happens if queer people are walking in public? I mean, there's actually two questions. How safe it is to walk in public in Budapest. I have friends who've been attacked just because they were holding hands in Budapest. And the second question, is it regarded as influencing children? So can you be actually prosecuted, attacked, subjected to some pressure because of this law? Luca.
So no one has been persecuted because of that, but we have also heard, we have a legal aid service, and we have had several reports about such hate crimes and violent attacks happening, not just in Budapest, but also in other municipalities and other smaller cities. It is absolutely 100% an issue. And what is even more concerning, I think, is that many times the attacker has explicitly stated that you cannot do this anymore. This is illegal now. You cannot hold hands. What if I had my child with me?
Yes.
So what this law is doing is it is actively encouraging people to attack same-sex couples, which I think is just horrible, and it just adds on the demonization of LGBTQI people. As for the actual examples, and you had a question whether a trans or a gay person could go into a school. So what happened is that this law states that any expert or civil society organization that would conduct sexual education needs to register, and then it needs a special permit. But the actual process of registering hasn't been planned or announced, and there is no actual body that is responsible for it. We have sent a letter inquiring who would be the designated body, but we have received no reply. And then a month before the referendum, it was announced that they would wait for the result, and then after the result is announced, then they would, implement the registry. Now, the referendum was actually invalid because we had a huge campaign with 14 NGOs. The Hungarian Helsinki Committee also took part in it, with Amnesty International Hungary and other 11 NGOs, LGBTQI and human rights NGOs. We ran a huge campaign that showcased that, how this referendum and these kind of policies impact LGBTQI people, and how in order for our loved ones to be safe and free in Hungary, we need to vote invalid in the referendum. So it didn't reach the validity threshold, and there was no other announcement after it about the registry. However, it was stated by Orban and other politicians as well that even though it has no legal basis, there is enough political basis, because more than 3 million people voted in the referendum, so they would move forward with more anti-LGBT causes. But what we have seen is that there are several organizations that have conducted either human rights education or sexual education for schools, and they cannot go to schools anymore. What happens is sometimes they are asked, can you come and give a lecture or a module about human rights, but can you promise us that you won't bring up LGBTQI topics? And then the organization says, we cannot do that, that is also absolutely relevant to this topic. And then the school says, well, if you cannot omit it, then you can't come, because they are afraid of what would happen. Or another instance is that it wasn't about human rights in general. I think it was about the rights of women and feminism. And still, the teachers pointed out that they cannot talk about LGBTQI issues. And then the organization said, we weren't planning, but if there are any questions from the students, then we will absolutely answer them. And then they were told that they either need to promise that they wouldn't talk and that they wouldn't answer such questions, or they, again, cannot actually come to the school. So that is 100% what is happening. Now with the law, teachers and school counselors are still free to talk about any kind of LGBTQI topics that they wish to. And we see that a lot of these experts and counselors and teachers still want to talk about these issues, because they know that a supportive environment is so important for LGBTQI children. However, again, our legal aid service, there are people who reported that they were put under very heavy pressure from the headmaster or the director of the institution, that they cannot talk about these issues. That is absolutely not what is in the law. However, the chilling effect reaches as far.
All right. Just very briefly, because we promised, the second case that the Commission goes after is a case with a book. Luca, did you follow this case? Can you explain what happened there?
Yes. So what happened is that the book that is called A Fairy Tale for Everyone, that features characters from socially vulnerable groups. There are disabled characters. There are characters who are not raised by their biological parents. Roma characters, for example, or other characters of color, and there are also LGBTQI characters. I think a trans, a lesbian, and a gay character. And the publisher, which is Labris Lesbian Association, was told that they need to put a special warning on the book that would warn them that this contains non-traditional gender roles and behaviors. Absolutely, we think that this is, absolutely discriminatory. So that is why the Commission is taking steps. And to just connect this back to the propaganda law, is that there is also a section that says that any book that talks about LGBTQI issues or covers it in any way needs to be sold in a separate packaging, probably so as to children shouldn't be able to open it. And it also cannot be in the windowsill. So this means that
it's like porn production, right? It's like treating a porn magazine.
Basically, yes. And it's the same with broadcasting, that it cannot be broadcasted before 10 in the evening. So it's the same slot as for adult movies and horror movies, which I think is, again, a shame. And now what happened is that there are smaller bookshops who are willing to do the actual packaging of the book on their own, but there are also larger booksellers who are not, and they are only willing to carry the book if the publisher themselves does the packaging. So this means that Labris, the publisher, had to raise the price of the book because they need to cover that. And it also means that in several bookshops, the book is not directly available. You need to ask specifically from a shop assistant, or it is put so high, like 3 meters high, that even the the shop assistant needs to get a special letter to get it down for you if you want to buy it. So
but that sounds like, it's actually a very convenient tool for the government. First of all, it has found their scapegoats. People are busy. It's not just Soros, it's also now LGBTIQ community, who people can feel bad about, and then at the same time, it's creating another taboo in a society where maybe those taboos not existed anymore or never, in this sort, and also, I think it also breaks the path and organizes the path for other minorities. I don't know what the sequence is. You see, the sequence here was a little bit different than in Russia. I think in Russia they started with something which was easier to do with LGBTI people, and then moved on. And here it's the other way around. They first attacked the pro-migrant organizations because it's kind of easier in Europe. But let's take one more question from the audience, and then I would like to talk about our reaction of the European Union on what is going on and whether this is sufficient. But there is one question by Kash. What did change during the past years? What are you working for changes in the future? So what kind of changes in the future do you it's a little bit difficult to understand the question, but so what changed during the past years? We discussed this, I think, but let's focus on what do you think we should change and we could change now, and the circumstances where this government, this precise government that basically marginalized LGBTIQ community and many other communities in the country, got a sweeping success in the domestic elections and has been reconfirmed again. Do you have any hope that you can do anything at all, or is it just trying to help the victims?
So I am actually very optimistic about the future in that sense. Is that in the last 5 years we have seen a huge change in public perception, and people are becoming much more accepting and tolerant of LGBTQI people. There are several opinion shows opinion surveys that show this, that since 2015 we have seen increasing support, and not just about accepting simply LGBTQI people, but also in cases such as marriage equality or legal gender recognition. And I think partly is this is due to the government's special attention, because people are seeking out information a lot of the times about what is actually going on, and we are actually getting also attention from the independent media. And just to give you one example, we have had several awareness-raising campaigns in Hungary in the last 3 years. And we had one about rainbow families. How do they live? What kind of discrimination do they suffer from? What kind of rights do or do not their children have that their children didn't have? And 3 years ago, the support for same-sex adoption was around 30%. And then last summer, we again polled this several times, and now it is almost 60%. So that's almost doubling. And I think this is hugely due to the campaign, that, this isn't just a taboo topic anymore that a few people know about, and a lot of people have stereotypes, and maybe they have seen a show that maybe had an LGBTQI couple. But the fact that we had a campaign where rainbow families with their names and their faces talked about their families, their love for their child, and what kind of difficulties they face or what kind of dreams they have. And I think this is one of the most effective way of campaigning. And it absolutely gave the public an opportunity to discuss this and to have arguments and dialogues. And so I think that we see the effect of these campaigns. And from our side, that is something that we want to continue on, that, the rule of law and the legal difficulties do exist, and they do make our job very, very difficult. But the public campaigns, I think they play a huge part in public perception, and we need to focus on that.
That's an incredible job you're doing, incredible work. Thank you for this, Luca. Márta, maybe, with your experience as a civil rights defender, what about Brussels? Are they doing their job to a sufficient degree? How would you assess the role of the Commission on this issue, but also on other issues regarding Hungary? Let's limit this to the Hungarian case.
Well, look, I think it's really important what Luca just said, that public mobilization and campaigning is essential, because this allows a society to have at least some discussion. In Hungary, with such a distorted media space where the government funded pro-Fidesz propaganda media machinery is extremely strong, I think it's really crucial that we get the message out. And there's a lot of solidarity and campaigning and action happening on, so to say, the ground or among citizens, particularly on this issue. And many people will then question whether there is any use for the European institutions' actions. And I always say to them that we need the European institutions to reinforce and to uphold the human rights framework, the structures that this citizen mobilization, citizen demand can also build on. So it's almost a sort of a circular movement where citizens must demand safeguards and effective safeguards for human rights, and they must demand it from the institutions, and the institutions should listen and hear this citizen demand and live up to their role. And with this sort of bottom up and top down approach, we can build stronger constraints, and constraints are key in any democracy. Only they will be able to restrain really this unacceptable, completely unacceptable and harmful policies and laws. And so yes, the European institutions need to be reminded to act, that they have a responsibility to act. And I think in this regard, the picture is fairly mixed, particularly the Commission when it comes to its legal duties. I think when this law was passed, it did act fairly fast, right? It started an infringement action already in July against Hungary on account of this propaganda law, arguing that the law violates the right to freedom of expression and non-discrimination. And then there was an exchange of letters, and then here we are a year later, and we're very much hoping that this week the Commission will decide to actually take the Hungarian government to the Court of Justice of the European Union. But a year has passed, and this year it might look, sort of short when it comes to the EU institutions' course of action, but it matters a lot because it allows, this kind of cases to happen, for bookstores to pull books, for people to feel that they can really harass other people on the street, for organizations, any organization really that is doing a Pride event this month, to have to consider hiring security guards so that their event wouldn't be disrupted. Their participants at their events have to be reassured that everything is going to be fine. And so a year is an extremely long time, and it allows these harmful, damaging sentiments to be boosted, and people to not feel certain that they can live their life safely. And so I think it is really important for the European Commission, particularly in these cases, to use its tools to take the bold and courageous steps, such as infringement actions, and to escalate them. The Hungarian government has really used this law in the most artificial way to use it as a sort of as a weapon in its fight for its illiberal, unruly rule of law practices. And I think the Commission should really just go ahead and not be swayed by these political,
not hesitate.
Very strong statements. Yeah, and so I certainly hope that after 2 rounds this week, we'll see some progress.
Well, that's our hope, and I hear hopeful signs that this will be the case. Let's hope that the Commission is also listening to us and will also follow our recommendation. A very, very brief question at the end, because we're coming to a close, maybe to Luca. We talked about the responsibility of institutions. What about responsibility of civil society? Is there solidarity? Is there a sense of solidarity among civil society, also between minorities? Because LGBTIQ question is just one of many questions. There is anti-Semitism issue. There is anti-Gypsyism issue. It's a so-called anti-Gypsy, so suppression of Roma, Sinti and Roma. Is there a coalition or an alliance of minorities fighting together, or is it still each fight isolated on their own?
I wouldn't say that we are isolated. I think that many organizations try to show solidarity with one another. There is not much coordination, I think, but that is also due to the fact that many of these organizations that are working for minority laws and specific minority groups are severely underfunded, especially Roma and Jewish organizations. And then this is a question whether they have the capacity of organizing programs, doing proactive campaigning, and many times, unfortunately, they do not have the resources for this. And I think it is also quite unique that in Hungary, the feminist movement is not especially strong. We have more LGBT organizations than feminist organizations, which is, I don't think this is the case globally. Most of the time we try to be in solidarity with each other, but obviously there is much room for improvement.
Thank you so much. There is much room for improvement also for our work here in Brussels, and Márta pointed out to what still can be done. The Parliament is doing a lot on those issues. We, just for those who maybe don't follow it very closely, but there will be also a Commission proposal on cross-border recognition of parenthood, especially regarding LGBTI families. Yep. This is something we are expecting now in the Legal Affairs Committee, and myself also. I hope to work on that file. There is a rights and values program, which could be a solution for funding for many of those minorities organizations. And there is this push that we are doing, cross-party push for strengthening standards for civil society and protecting civil society, also through inauguration of sort of a European status for NGOs that would be able to advocate those rights. So there is a whole array of different things. And yes, we do hope and we do expect the Commission to go to court against the Hungarian government on those really, really terrible cases that we are witnessing, and also about this law, which really paves the way and the path to hell. We see this in Russia now and many other countries. Thank you so much. Let's stay optimistic like Luca does. And thank you for giving us a little bit of a hope for the future, but there is a lot of homework to do. Thank you to both of my guests, and thank you to the viewers. See you next time during another topic discussion, and happy Pride.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you.
All the best.
Thanks.